how do you respond when unexpected events shatter life as you know it? It's something I've had to face. I'm Karen Darke. Today I'm an athlete, author and mindset coach. I was a silver medalist in the London 2012 Paralympics and became Paralympic champion in Rio in 2016. But I started my working life as a geologist until I had a climbing accident which resulted in paralysis from the chest down. Overnight, my life changed and I've had to find ways of overcoming the many challenges I face. Of course, I'm not alone. It's May 2020 and we're all facing abnormal restrictions owing to the coronavirus pandemic. This virus has turned our lives upside down, and it's this experience of events shaking up our lives and how we respond to that, which I'm exploring in these 3 programmes. My guest today is Justine Shuttleworth. 6 years ago, Justine became very ill. At the time, she was a single mum running a successful property business. She sought medical advice, but her condition got worse. During the next 18 months, she saw 14 doctors, 9 psychiatrists, and a hormone specialist before she was treated for Lyme disease. Her condition started to improve and she gradually regained control of her life. Well, like me, Justine is currently restricted to her home where she joins us on the phone. Hello.
Hello, hi.
Hi, thanks for joining us this morning. As someone who was housebound for many months as a result of your illness, I'm wondering how the present situation compares.
In some ways, I'm used to it because when your life changes, when you've had some form of chronic illness or something that lasts for a very long time and your life turns upside down, you have to learn to live in a particular way. And in order to get through it, your life becomes much smaller. I think you learn to appreciate things that are different. It's not so much about going out and doing things and meeting people. There seems to be some form of an inner peace that I think you have to learn to adapt to. And I think because I've had it for such a long time and I'm much, much better than I was, I'm able to go back into that space a bit more. Not that I'm enjoying isolation completely, because I enjoy being with people, but I'm much more able to adapt to it, I think, because I'm used to being on my own. I think when you get ill, you have to be on your own a lot, or you are on your own a lot, especially when nobody really understands what's going on with you. So I learnt to have my own isolation, I suppose. It became much more based on home life and on nature and on a sense of peace I had to get within myself, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do it.
I can relate to that myself quite a lot. I suppose initially I spent a lot of time stuck indoors or in hospitals, and you just get used to changing your focus, don't you?
Yes.
So let's just turn the clock back to 6 years ago and tell me what happened when you first began to feel unwell, the kinds of symptoms you were having.
I started to get vertigo. I was losing my cognitive, function. I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't get to my son's school. I was getting lost all the time. My son had to help me get to the school and help me get to the dentist. I went into a form of disassociation, I think is what it's called, where I couldn't recognise my son. I could recognise his face, but I didn't know who he was. I couldn't recognise my friends. So I became very isolated at that point, because if someone came to my door, I didn't know who they were, and that's really frightening. I kind of got used to actually looking a bit strange almost, What do you do when you don't recognise someone or you don't remember anything you've done with people? I had to kind of get used to it. So I isolated myself, I think probably for about just over a year. I was losing my cognitive function more and more. I couldn't make the bed. I couldn't cook an egg. I couldn't cook a meal. So, it was tough.
So your son was keeping you going. He was everything to you, but he wasn't well at this time either, was he?
My son got sick first. My son got Lyme disease. So he had 2 bullseye rashes, which were recognised immediately. And then I started to get symptoms. So I'd stand up and the floor felt like it was jelly. And my heart wouldn't stop beating and racing and racing and racing. And then I went out the front door and it was like I had a band around my head, a really, really tight band. And the light, I was photosensitive. I didn't know what it was. All I knew is I couldn't look at the sky. I felt everything was too much. And I ended up taking myself to the hospital. But I think because I've had depression in the past and because of my age, so it's perimenopausal, I think a lot of people at that point in life can be put into a group of depression, anxiety, menopause. So if you have things which are unexplainable, they are explained in those groups. My anxiety was, I've never felt anything like it. But I knew it wasn't depression because I'd had depression. I just kept on searching. I suppose I had to search because I knew I was getting sicker and sicker.
Okay, so it was more that you weren't quite sure what the cause of your illness was. You'd been told it was anxiety, but that uncertainty must have been adding to your feeling that you were losing control.
It was all apparently in my imagination. So it was a fight. It was a real fight to keep going. So I kept on, but then because I was told it was anxiety, I kept checking myself into psychiatric hospitals because I needed to get better because I had a son and he's my life. He was everything to me and I had to make sure that I could be there for him. So it pushed me to keep going, keep looking. And eventually I ended up going into psychosis, which was not easy, to say the least. And I checked myself into the 3rd psychiatric hospital. And at that point, I knew I was losing my brain. I'd signed all my checks. I'd signed everything over to my brother and said, I won't be all right in a couple of days. I know I won't be. I think I said by the morning. So I signed all my checks and said, you have to deal with my life because I can't do it anymore. I'm losing my mind. And then I checked myself into another psychiatric hospital. So, no, it wasn't easy.
It sounds really, really hard, like a complete sense of uncertainty. Can you remember what it was like when you were at your lowest?
Not knowing who you are is the most frightening thing I think I've ever experienced. Yeah, well, you wake up and you don't know who you are. I would look in the mirror, I didn't know who I was. When you don't know who your child is, that's really frightening. And somewhere inside me, I just had to get up and I had to fight through it. And that's when I made a decision, no matter what happened to me, I'd accepted whatever was going to happen was going to happen. If I was locked up, I was locked up, or I'd get better. But I would always search to get better because I knew there was something wrong that I didn't know what it was. I had 5 months in bed that I don't remember of chronic fatigue, and then my body went into electric shocks all over it. So I couldn't sit still. So even though I wasn't sleeping, I had to walk. And I walked and walked and walked. And I couldn't sit in a chair. My body felt like it was burning and on fire. It became too much. I think that is what took me into the psychosis. If you don't sleep for nearly a year at all and you just walk and walk, your brain goes. So it's very, very frightening, yeah.
So how did you start to kind of claw your way out of the situation? How did you start to get control back of your life again?
It's a choice. You make a choice to keep going. When you're in that much of a state and you can't think properly and not knowing what's wrong with you. I think not knowing what's wrong with you. So I was constantly having different symptoms. I'd wake up in the morning with one symptom, with another symptom. And the insomnia was so massive for such a long time. But you have fear, I lost my sense of smell. I couldn't smell anything. My brother used to put coffee under my nose or different things. I'd shut my eyes and I had no sense of smell. So it's very, very frightening, yeah. But you have to concentrate, I suppose, on staying alive.
So it's not the same at all, but I remember when I was first paralysed, realising that there were certain things I couldn't do and finding it really hard to ask for help. I'm just wondering, what was that like for you? Did you find it hard to admit that you needed help?
I don't think I've never thought about it. Now you mention it. I had to ask for help with my son, so I had to, and I didn't find that hard because that was about him. But I suppose when it came to me, strangely enough, I didn't like asking for help. No, because when you're so used to doing things on your own and living an independent life, to admit that you can't do it is actually, I suppose you feel like you're failing. And you have to, I think it's very, very difficult. I don't know. I don't think I ever really asked for help in that way. But I read an article about Lyme disease my brother got, and I had every symptom described in the article. And at that point, I knew that that's what I had, and I immediately got tested in Germany. I was being treated in this country for post-traumatic stress until I found out I had Lyme. And then that stopped because When you know what you've got, you can deal with it. But when you have no idea, you don't know what's going to come next. So I ended up going on an intravenous drugs, and then I ended up being treated in America and got better. Not completely better, but a lot better. You know, I still fight it. And I know that I've been very lucky in a way that I had enough money to be able to go to America and be treated by private clinics and be tested in Germany. I really understand there are a lot of people who are sick and they can't have that treatment, and I fully respect that. It's taken years. If I look back now and I know what I was like a year ago, I'm much better than I was a year ago. It's very, very slow, the process. But yes, I'm much better now.
Must have been such a huge relief to actually have a diagnosis at last and to understand what it had all been about.
I can't tell you what relief it was. As soon as I found out what was wrong with me and I was put on the right treatments, I then knew that I had the light at the end of the tunnel. And as long as there's hope, you can keep going. As long as you see that hope. When the hope goes, that's when you have the problem, when you can't see a way out of it. And then when I knew what was wrong with me, and I was suddenly with people who had the same thing and people who understood chronic Lyme's disease, you feel at home, you're at peace, because if you have these symptoms, you're not going mad, you're not crazy, you're not making them up, you're not a hypochondriac. They actually understand what's wrong with you. And once you know that you're not going crazy because you feel like you are, and that this is part of an illness that is being treated, then you have the hope. And as soon as you've got hope, you can just keep going. It's when the hope goes, life becomes intolerable.
So, Justine, it's been quite an incredible experience in many ways, but what do you think you've learned from it?
What they say in Buddhism, they say when something goes wrong, congratulations, you're learning a new lesson. I would never want to go through any of it again, but you do learn. I feel like I've got to a point where I can feel, but also there's a sense of peace in me. We always say I'm going to be happier if this happens, or I buy that house, or I do this, or I do that. But there is an inner peace in me which I didn't have before. And whether you go through these journeys sometimes and you have to really delve into your soul, really, and to work out who you are and what actually is important to you in life and the fundamentals of life. That's what keeps me going now, actually. And laughing, actually. Getting my humour back was huge. Humour is just massive in life. I think it carries you through life. It does me.
We can't take ourselves too seriously, can we?
I always say it to my son. I say, if you take it all seriously, your life is going to be dreadful. You know, I think I took life really seriously before. I've kind of given up with that a little bit now.
So now you have much more control over your life again. Have you made plans for the future, or are you just living day to day?
No, I have. I've just bought a derelict church that I'm about to do up. That was what I used to do before. I used to renovate properties. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. I'm a bit nervous because I haven't done it for a long time, but I'm also incredibly excited to do it.
Well, I wish you every success, Justine, and thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us.
Thank you. Thank you.